Hey guys, prior planning prevents poor performance, and that applies to a lot of things, but especially your off-road setup. Whether or not it's an occasional driven truck, kind of like my D2, or if it's more of a daily driver like my 4Runner, you're gonna wanna make sure that before you head out and go on your adventure that you do some solid pre-checks prior to. Checking out a leak that you had, even just checking your oil. Any number of things could possibly go wrong. It's so easy to get caught up in just the go of things. You know, it's like you've got the big trip coming up. You've planned it down. You've got your food. You've got your clothes. You've got your camping gear. You've got all the things, right? But you just forget. You forget to check to make sure that your remote's charged up on your winch. You forget to throw in a bow shackle or a soft shackle. Just any number of things that could come up, and it could tremendously impact your fun. It could kill your trip, or it could often injure you or kill your vehicle. And we don't want that to happen. So there's a few things that we want to make sure that we're doing prior to heading out on our excursions. Now, a few years ago, something similar to this happened to me. I was taking my little boy with me. We had got everything that we needed for the weekend. I didn't feel so hot. I was getting a little bit sick, kind of getting a sore throat, starting to get that hot and humid part of the early part of the summer. And so we embark on this trip to the Hot Springs Off-Road Park, and we're taking the Land Rover. So everything was a little bit out of my normal flow. Got a little bit of a late start. We get off, get to the park, get set up. I cook him some food. We have a little campfire, get a night's sleep. The next day, we're gonna meet some of other Texas Rovers members that were gonna be at the park, but they all no-showed. So we made some new friends. A guy in a Tacoma and a GX. My brother was in his Bronco, and we proceed to start hitting some trails. I had a little oil light start to flicker at me here and there, and that last trail we were on, it's rather straight up, and with the nose pointed up in the air, I could start to hear it giving a little tap tap every once in a while. So I'm gonna check the oil real quick just to make sure that it's not low before we have a seized motor. All right, luckily here at the park they do have some oil. It wasn't like totally overpriced or anything, and I'm gonna have to go with some 1040. Normally I run at least a 1540 or a 2050, but since we're a little low, 1040 will be all right because it just needs to have some lubrication. So let's put a quart in. We'll check it and but I think I'm a little over a quart low, so I might go with a quart and a half anyway. With that crisis averted, we were back to wheeling. Any guesses as to how low that engine oil was in the Land Rover? Yeah, I hate to admit this, but I was almost 4 quarts low. Now, that Land Rover will hold somewhere around almost 8.5 quarts or 9 quarts. So, I mean, yeah, drastically low. Still to this day, I don't know what went through my head, because I normally do these checks, but this is why we need a pre-check inspection before we leave and embark on our trips. No matter how short, how long, it can prevent disaster, because you know, I didn't notice it didn't do any of this, any tell signs as far as like engine clatter or anything like that, until I started pulling some super steep inclines. But anyway, before we get into the pre-trip inspection, enjoy a little bit more wheeling here, and we'll get into the business of things. Now back left. There you go. I just follow it on down from there. All right, so first things first, we are going to check our fluids. This is just easy to do. Basically, a lot of it can be just visually looked at, but there are a few things, and if you want to go a little deeper, if you've got one that kind of leaks a little, especially out of the transfer case like this Land Rover, you might want to school yourself on how to check that and how to add differential fluid and transfer case fluid. If it's more of your daily driver and you feel pretty confident that everything's in good working order, kind of like my 4Runner here, we just want to just double check the things that would need attention prior to heading out. We're going to go over those things now. In an operational range for my power steering fluid, and right back here we have the brake fluid. It's just something that you want to double check that as well. I can clearly see that that is full. If you start to use brake fluid, it could be indicative of a leak or severe pad wear, either one. And on this truck, we have a driver's side dipstick. That oil is pretty dark. So I've got a trip coming up in a couple of days, so I'm probably going to do an oil change because it looks like it's time. Coolant tank, it's just slightly low, but I started it a minute ago and it got warm. So you want to check it when it's cold, and might need to add just a slight little bit. Next thing I'm going to do is just visually look at kind of the places that would show some sort of coolant leak or an oil leak. All right, so I've just recently changed the air filter in the 4Runner. No need to do that. Something else to observe and just look at would be your electrical connections. Just want to check, make sure everything's tight, you don't have any corrosion, anything like that. If you've got a lot of extra wiring, as I do, also wouldn't be a bad idea to just double check make sure you don't have any wires that look like they're getting hot or thin or could cause some sort of an issue. Now, if you're going to go on a longer trip, batteries are a little long in the tooth or whatnot, almost any auto parts store, at least here in the States, will do a system check and check your batteries free of charge just to make sure that they get a clean bill of health before going on a longer trip. All right, you're gonna check your hoses. Make sure that you don't have a hose that looks swelled up. All of your rubber, any of your coolant lines. And while we're at it at this point, it's a good time to check the tension on your belts and inspect your belts for any kind of cracking. The abuse that your tires are gonna take. At a minimum, give a good inspection. Make sure that you don't have any cuts in the sidewall. One thing to keep in mind is on the inner part of the tire, the part that you cannot see, that sidewall can take some pretty good abuse, especially when you're aired down, going over rocks, stumps, sticks, different things. You may have an issue there that you are just not aware of. Check your lug torque on your lug nuts. And if you're running spacers like I am on this vehicle and on this vehicle, do yourself a favor, make sure that you are checking the torque on those spacers quite often. They can get loose, and they can get you in a massive amount of problems if you lose a wheel. At this point, let's get into the vehicle. Let's check your springs. Make sure you don't have any kind of an issue with springs or shocks. You want to be looking for bolts that have become loose. Sometimes you can do a shake test just to see if maybe you've got the integrity of your bushings. Inspect your U-joints. You want to check and make sure that for the integrity of your U-joint, make sure you don't have excessive play in that. Also, it would be a good idea to inspect your exhaust. Make sure that all of your hangers are where they're supposed to be. While you're under here, just look for anything else that might be irregular or leaks. Also, a good time to post-trip to see if you've got any new dents. Now, moving on to the front, again, inspecting your bushings, any ball joints that can be greased would be a good time to go ahead and get that out of the way. Your tie rod ends, steering components, and your CV axles would also be inspected at this point. We're going to make sure that all of our bulbs are illuminated, all of our turn signals, hazards, high, low, your brake lights, everything is functioning as it should. Now, if you are trailering, it would also be an opportune time to check and make sure that all those things are operational as well. And if you need to get a helper to assist with this, that's a good time to grab a friend to just help you run through your light check. Sound advice here would be to start your vehicle. Make sure you don't have any new lights on. Make sure that your gauges are in the normal operating mode. Engage your four-wheel drive. Would try 4 high first. Shifting into 4 low. Would also at this point go through your traction control systems, any of your 4-wheel drive extra systems, MTS, crawl control. Just make sure that all of your suite of 4-wheel drive switches is operational and functioning at this point. Make sure that you have a clean line of sight out of your windshield. Make sure that your windshield washer fluid is topped off. Check your wiper blades and your side mirrors for cleanness. First of all, not pictured here is a fire extinguisher. You want to make sure that you carry a operational fire extinguisher, a good pair of working gloves, a pull strap, some D-rings, soft shackles. At a minimum, that will get you out of a lot of trouble. Make sure that your remotes are charged up, that you have a remote for your winch. Make sure your winch is operational. Make sure your communication devices are charged and working. For your winches, you want to make sure that if they have an on switch and they're in a hard to get spot, we're going to turn those on. Make sure that your winch will work with the remote that you bring. And if you're wondering, well, that's crazy, like how would that ever happen? Well, let me tell you a little story here. We had spent the weekend traveling through the Ozarks and it snowed pretty well. It was probably still well below freezing at this point. Ground's a little soft. This is an extremely off camber, and you can see the back end's trying to slide. Now, my fear was, as I tried to gain traction, I was going to end up getting on the truck that's stuck. And you're wondering, well, how'd that truck get there? I have no idea. It was just blocking the trail, and we had to get around it. So here I am, freezing, trying to hurry, trying to fumble with taking off this cover so I can get behind the radiator and reach my hand down and turn my power on to the winch. Not ideal. That winch should have already have been on before I left for our trip. So long story short, I try to pair my remote to the winch and realized that I have the remote for a warranted winch that just happened to be in the garage, and I grabbed the wrong one. So we ended up having to use traction boards. We made it out, but we spent critical time and effort, and I mean, if I would have really have needed that winch, I was gonna be dead in the water. Considering that we've done a full check of the vehicle, one more time, make sure that we do not have any engine lights on, and check your fuel. Gonna make sure that you leave with a full tank of gas, and make sure that you have insurance, driver's license, any cash that you're going to need, and it would not be a bad idea to let somebody know exactly where you're going to be and an approximate check-in time to when you get there. Make sure that you are buckled up and your seatbelts are fully operational. And if you have not done so already, make sure that your gear is secured and you have a pure line of sight out of your windshield. No plan is foolproof, but hopefully with just doing just a moderate amount of pre-checking and just make a checklist. That's probably the simplest thing you could do. Just make a checklist, the things that you need to have, the things that you need to have for your person. You just run down the list. They're there. Hey, everything's good. You know, forgetting a pillow is one thing. That's a nuisance. But, you know, if you get a critical piece of recovery gear is missing, it could be tough to handle. So we just want to make sure that we are doing this, you're prepared, and anticipating something to go wrong, you can handle it much easier than you would if it's just a surprise. It's time now to have fun. Get out there, hit the trails. Let me know what your pre-checks are. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to our channel. Thank you.